September 11th, 1943. Fascist Italy is no more. When the fascists who replaced Mussolini took over at the end of July, they looked for a way to exit the war without losing everything. Clinging to a last hope to remain in power, they looked for a path where both their Nazi ally and the United Nations would allow her to leave peacefully into a state of non-belligerent. A pipe dream that has now ended, as this week sees the Italians' unconditional surrender to the United Nations allies from September 3rd become public. Now, like a female Black Widow spider pounces on her mate to devour him, the German Nazi Reich sets out to ingest all of Italy and her ill-gotten gains. The United Nations casts its nets to stop her, and the Italians are caught in the middle. This is War Against Humanity, a series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus Olsson. I'm in Indy's war room today because as this comes out, we will be in Normandy to record for our D-Day 24-hour coverage next year. Now, we're about to leave, and I didn't have time to get to my own bunker. It's nice in here. Anyway, last week, the Vilna ghetto suffered more deportations to concentration labor camps in occupied Estonia. In the Tarnov ghetto, Amon Gut ran amok, killing dozens with his own hands, deporting thousands to his labor torture camp, and sending thousands more to their deaths in trains to Auschwitz-Birkenau. In Denmark, the Danish government was dissolved and replaced by a repressive German military administration. The British and U.S. allies abandoned the first air battle on Berlin as it grew too costly and inefficient. The civilian population of Berlin is, however, by now mostly evacuated. That is not yet the case for the inhabitants of Mannheim and Ludwigshafen. In the night of September 5th to 6th, 605 aircraft bombed the twin cities. They dropped 150 delayed explosion, 2,000 detonation, 350,000 rod, and 5,000 phosphor bombs, and 34 of the bombers are shot down by flak and defending Luftwaffe aircraft. In Mannheim, the damage to the city is massive, with most of the inner city gone. The destruction is so extensive that before they can tally the number of buildings that have been destroyed or damaged, the next raid will already be underway. Despite that, although the exact number of dead is unknown for this night's specific raid, from the total death rate in the city this month, we can conclude that relative to the destruction, it is fairly low, probably in the lower dozens. In difference to other German cities and municipalities, Mannheim has pursued an extensive bomb shelter construction program since the 1930s. Although the city is already now in large parts leveled with the ground and bombing will continue, Mannheim will register one of the lowest German death rates per attack for the war. Just a stone's throw away across the River Rhine and in the neighboring state is Ludwigshafen. Here, the story is a different one. They have not built as many bomb shelters. In this night, the structural damage to Ludwigshafen is bad, with the destruction of 1,000 homes and 4 industrial buildings, with damage to 8 more. But that is still far less than the uncountable damage to Mannheim, and yet more people in Ludwigshafen are wounded and killed, with 568 injured and 127 dead. Further north in Denmark, the German occupiers tightened their grip further. This week, the death penalty for resistance and sabotage imposed last week is extended. From now on, it's a capital crime to have knowledge of resistance activities and fail to report them to the German occupiers. The Germans also tightened their hold across South and Southeastern Europe. On the 9th, the day after the Italian capitulation, signed secretly by the Badoglio government 5 days earlier, is announced by General Dwight Eisenhower, the London newspaper The Guardian's headline article opens with, "Italy has surrendered unconditionally to the Allies, and hostilities between the United Nations and Italy ended early yesterday evening." The article concludes with, "All Italians who now act to help eject the German aggressor from Italian soil will have the assistance and support of the United Nations." But that will be an uphill battle. Germany has already prepared for this event and initiated Operation Axis to take over the territories occupied by Italy and, well, Italy itself. Already before the armistice is announced, the Germans have increased their presence in strategic positions across the Italian mainland. German Field Marshal Smiling Albert Kesselring, Supreme Commander South for the Wehrmacht and in charge of Operation Axis, has his headquarters at Frascati, southwest of Rome. The United Nations plan is to cut off the head of the German operations by bombing Kesselring and his staff out of action before the operation can even take off. But the German headquarters is right in the town's populated areas, and many Italian headquarters are also spread throughout the towns in various villas. The Italian generals have been warned of the pending attack already on the 3rd when the armistice was signed, and are absent. The civilian population has not, and neither has the Regia Aeronautica, the Italian Air Force. When the U.S. Army Air Force flies in with 131 bombers, they are faced by an inferior response by Italian planes. The defense does, however, sow enough confusion to make the poor targeting capability of the time even worse. The town is largely destroyed and 485 civilians die, while the Germans come away fairly unhurt and more or less already on their way to a new location for Kesselring's headquarters. By the time the all-clear is sounded and the Italian civilians emerge from their shelters, the armistice has been announced. Most townspeople decide to flee head over heels southward to avoid being caught in what will soon be a German-occupied zone. They leave behind the ruins of their town and the dead bodies. The German plan is to simply put the whole area to flames, calling it a contaminated area because of the many corpses. Before that can happen, though, a few townspeople who have remained begin to organize burials. That same day, the Germans attack Italian troops pretty much everywhere. In most cases, the confused Italian army, who've also not been informed of the capitulation, offer little resistance. By the end of this week, most of Italy, not already controlled by the Allies, except for Sardinia and parts of Apulia, are in firm hands by the Germans. This puts the 43,000 Jewish Italians in northern and central Italy at great peril. Until now, they have enjoyed a far less deadly existence than most other people of Jewish ethnicity inside Axis-controlled Europe. Sure, many of them have been incarcerated in semi-open camps, but they are very lenient. Some of the camp inhabitants will later liken them to poorly managed holiday resorts. Despite repeated demands by the Nazis, former Italian dictator Benito Mussolini has not handed them over to the Germans for murder or enslavement until death. SS and Nazi police units are now being outfitted to end that respite on persecution and bring the final solution to Italy. The end to freedom gained with sweat and blood also comes to Greece. We saw in March this year how the area around Grevena and Grevena itself was liberated by Greek partisans of the EM. This week, the region is once again under Axis control, but now by German forces. On the 9th, Alexander Löhr, commander of the Wehrmacht in southeastern Europe, demands the immediate surrender of all Italian forces in Greece. Some do give up and are promptly transported to Germany or the Eastern Front, where they end up in POW and forced labor camps. But not all Italian forces comply. On Corfu, it is the Italians who arrest the 400 German troops on the island. Now, Corfu, Kefalonia, and many smaller islands in the Ionian Sea are under the command of General Antonio Gandin. The government back in Italy sends him orders to hold on and resist. Despite the initial arrest on Corfu, he knows that he will soon be outnumbered by his former ally. So Gandin teams up with his former enemies, the Greek Iam and Elas partisans. On the mainland, the 24th Infantry Division, Pinerolo, in Thessaly, doesn't just team up with the partisans, but outright defects to them. On September 11th, all 9,000 men of the division are amalgamated into the mountain units of Elas. In other places, Italian soldiers who just want out of the war sell their weapons and equipment at auction to local Greek civilians and partisans. As this black market takes off, there are even reported cases of Italians ransoming imprisoned Greeks to their relatives, threatening that they will otherwise be handed over to the Germans. In any case, it's a significant increase of firepower for the partisans. For instance, in Athens, Iam only had 40 rifles before the Italian surrender, which has now increased to 1,200. An armory fleshed out with a large number of revolvers, grenades, and submachine guns. It's a windfall of guns that many believe will soon come to good use when the United Nations come to fight the Germans, a fight that some feel cannot wait. On Crete, resistance leader Manolis Banduvas decides to strike at the German outpost at Katousimi on September 9th. Banduvas has been working with the British SOE, but he does not consult with them on his actions this night. His motivations are a bit unclear, but clearly he expects an Allied landing on Crete very soon. It's an insignificant outpost, 2 sentries manned by rotation are charged with monitoring the potato harvest that shall go to the Wehrmacht and keep a general outlook on the region. Although Banduvas will later claim that he only meant to take the sentries prisoners, that isn't what happens. They are killed and their bodies are thrown into a nearby ravine. When the bodies are discovered, a company of German soldiers is sent out to flush out the resistance and enact reprisals. Banduvas hears of the pending attack and sets up an ambush with 40 of his men. He does surprise the Germans, and although vastly outnumbering the partisans, they suffer heavy losses and are forced to retreat. When Generalleutnant Friedrich Wilhelm Müller, commander of the Heraklion, hears of the events, he is furious. On the last day of this week, he orders the 65th Regiment of the 22nd Luftlande Infanteriedivision to destroy the province of Janos. You shall immediately execute, without any procedure, all males over 16 years old and all those who will be arrested in the countryside, regardless of gender and age. As this week ends, that operation is in preparation. But not all groups who have recently resisted the Axis powers stay on that side of the fight. A month ago, we saw the Albanian far-right Bali Kombëtar and the Communist National Liberation Movement join forces only to fall out after their first successful joint attack, when both the Yugoslav and Albanian Communist Party denounced the cooperation as counter-revolutionary. Now, when the Germans move in, they look to Bali Kombëtar as potential allies and a tool to avoid the two-way fight the Italians faced. So this week, they offered to back Bali Kombëtar's bid for governing Albania, even dangling the possibility of a greater Albania with Kosovo incorporated. The plan is, of course, to install them as the Nazi puppet government of Albania. And while the Wehrmacht moves in here, further to the northeast, they're moving out, leaving behind nothing but death and destruction. In the Ukrainian SSR, more and more land is again returning to Soviet control. Back in 1941, when they were being driven out, the Soviets scorched the earth. While many fled with the Red Army, others remained in the ruins and began to rebuild and replant. That is now again to be destroyed, as on September 7th, Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler issues new orders to the head of the SS and police forces in the occupied Soviet Union, Hans Adolf Prutzmann. During evacuation of regional posts in the Ukraine, you must make certain that no people, livestock, grain, or railroads are left behind, that no house remains standing, and no mine remains that has not yet been severely damaged, requiring years to repair, that no well can be found that has not been poisoned. The enemy must come upon a totally scorched and destroyed earth. Discuss these matters immediately and do everything humanly possible. Heil Hitler, yours, Ha Himmler. Himmler has another target that he will begin to dismantle this week, too. The Theresienstadt ghetto and the Protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia in the occupied part of Czechoslovakia. Now, as we have seen, the Nazis have held Theresienstadt up to the world as a model of Jewish settlement. Life here has been sold as being gentle and good, free from any of the terror stories that have emerged from other camps. It is, of course, a lie, as the conditions in Theresienstadt are dismal, and large groups have been deported to the extermination factories to be murdered, or to other camps as slave labor. But to at least uphold the images of the lie, Theresienstadt has not been fully liquidated, and the incarcerated have been given some superficial advantages, like being allowed to pursue cultural activities and some education for the children. One of them is 13-year-old Helga Kinsky-Polak, sent by the Germans from Poland to Theresienstadt with her father. Helga has been able to keep a diary writing extensively about her life while in the ghetto. She is forced to live apart from her father in the young girls' barrack. Here, the girls offer each other any comfort they can and forge deep friendships to replace their absent families. Relationships that also often end when another transport leaves for occupied Poland. On September 5th, 1943, Helga finds out that her friend Zdenka is going to be sent away. It's a difficult parting. Under tears, the other girls give Zdenka small gifts and any morsels of food they can spare. The next day, September 6th, Helga writes, "I got up at 6 in the morning to see Zdenka again. Everything was boarded up all around so no one could get to them, and so they could not run away. I jumped over, ran up to the last people going through the gates. I saw the train pull away. In one of the cars, Zdenka was riding away." Zdenka and the other 5,000 passengers are headed for Auschwitz-Birkenau, where they arrive on the 8th. But instead of the usual treatment of immediate murder, the deportees, many families, are taken to Familienlager B2B. They are listed as SB for Sonderbehandlung, special treatment. In total, 18 such transports are now made from Theresienstadt to Auschwitz. The Nazis have simply moved the propaganda lie about Theresienstadt to Auschwitz-Birkenau. Once again, these people will write postcards and letters to relatives and friends professing that things aren't as bad as they may have heard. Once again, these lies will be used to pacify victims into clinging to the last hope they have, that their impending death is perhaps only a nasty rumor after all. Many of the people on the 18 transports will soon die of starvation or illness, and after 6 months, their Sonderbehandlung status will be voided, and they will be like anyone else at Auschwitz-Birkenau, at constant risk to be selected to be murdered in the killing machinery of the crematoria. They are in many ways representative of the point that the war in Europe has reached as the summer of 1943 enters its last week. The Axis war effort is crumbling. They are on the retreat, or trying desperately to salvage the wreckage of their war gains. Italy has fallen. The Eastern European Axis countries are increasingly reluctant to dance to the Führer's music. In the middle of this chaos, like a burning giant slowly dancing to a beat of its own that no one else can hear, the Nazi German Reich continues to send out its flaming arms at the humans still in her circumference, flames that then snake through humanity like the writhing tentacles of a dying kraken, still hell-bent on pulling down every last ship it can reach. Because suffering and death is the nature of this beast, and as long as the monster breathes, she will maim, torture, and kill. As long as she can speak her commands, she will infect the world and pull her enemies down to her level in a fight where all hope is an illusion, and the monster sets the rules for how the fight shall be fought. There seems to be only one hope left. Kill the monster and destroy all her eggs before they hatch and become parasites that turn us all into monsters. Kill the monster. Resist. Remember that we are human, and she is nothing but a worm. Her name is hatred. Never forget.